She gave her last $10 to a stranger, unaware he was a millionaire who'd change her life. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The gray drizzle soaked the empty train platform, turning the cracked concrete into shallow mirrors that reflected the cold March sky. Emily stood there, clutching her purse to her chest, shivering under her thin coat. Her shoes were damp, her stomach hollow, but the small, crumpled $10 bill in her pocket was her last thread of security. That $10 was supposed to buy her dinner after her job interview, the one she'd barely made it to, the one that had ended with the recruiter's polite smile and the same words she'd heard too often. "We'll be in touch." She wasn't counting on that call. She was counting on surviving tonight. The train board flickered above her, its orange letters blurring through the mist. Then she heard a voice. "Excuse me, miss," the man said, his tone hesitant, low, almost apologetic. She turned, startled. A stranger stood a few feet away, rain soaking his frayed jacket. His beard was overgrown, his hair plastered to his forehead, and his blue eyes held something she hadn't seen in a while, genuine desperation. "I'm sorry," he said again, shivering. "My wallet was stolen. I just need $10 for a ticket home. I swear I'll pay you back if you can trust me. Please." Emily froze, clutching her bag tighter. $10. The only thing between her and an empty night. The rain hissed against the metal roof. She could walk away. Everyone else already had. Commuters glanced and turned away, pretending not to hear. Her mind screamed no, but her heart whispered something else. "You don't have anyone to call?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Phone's dead. Tried asking others." Nobody wanted to talk. "How do I know you're not lying?" she pressed, her voice trembling. "You don't," he admitted. His honesty disarmed her. For a moment she saw not a beggar, but a man who looked utterly lost. Her fingers brushed the bill inside her pocket. It was insane. She could barely feed herself. But the thought of walking away felt heavier than the fear of losing it. With a deep breath, she pulled out the 10 and held it out between them. "I don't know why," she said, barely above a whisper, "but I believe you." The man stared at the bill as if it were something sacred. Slowly, he took it, his hand shaking. "I promise I'll pay you back," he said, his voice cracking. Emily smiled faintly. "Just get home safe." The train screeched into the station, sending a gust of wind through the platform. He nodded once, then turned quickly and disappeared into the crowd boarding the train. Within seconds, he was gone. Emily stood frozen, her empty hand still hovering midair. The platform felt even colder now. Somewhere inside, a strange ache bloomed, not regret, exactly, but a quiet fear that she might have just given away her last chance at comfort. She took a long breath and whispered to herself, "Maybe doing the right thing is supposed to hurt a little." The train pulled away, and the echo of its wheels faded into the night, leaving her alone with the sound of the rain and the hollow weight of 10 lost dollars. By the next morning the rain had cleared, but the grayness still clung to the city like a second skin. Emily sat at a bus stop, clutching her worn backpack on her lap, her fingers stiff from the cold. Inside the bag was everything she owned: a folded resume, a cracked phone that barely held a charge, and a sketchpad filled with half-finished dreams. Her stomach growled softly. She ignored it. The $10 bill was gone, and so was the tiny safety net it represented. But somewhere deep down, she did not regret giving it away. It was the only decision in weeks that had made her feel human. The bus hissed to a stop, and she climbed aboard, swiping her nearly empty transit card. The driver gave her a sympathetic look. She avoided his eyes and sat near the window. The glass fogged with her breath as the city blurred by coffee shops, offices, lives she could not afford. She got off near a rundown apartment building that used to be her home. The landlord had changed the locks 3 days ago. Her old key still sat in her pocket, a useless piece of metal. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the door, then turned away. "You said Friday," she whispered under her breath. "Just until Friday." But no one was listening. She spent the rest of the day walking aimlessly downtown, passing people who looked through her as if she were invisible. Her shoes rubbed blisters on her heels. The air smelled faintly of roasted nuts from a nearby vendor. She reached into her pocket, finding only lint. At sunset, she ducked into the public library to warm up. The air was dry, smelling of paper and dust. She chose a corner chair between two tall bookshelves and curled up, hugging her backpack. Around her, the world was quiet except for the soft turning of pages and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. For a few hours, she could almost forget how close she was to losing everything. At closing time, a security guard approached. "Sorry, miss," he said gently. "We're closing up." She nodded, forcing a smile. "I know. I just lost track of time." Out on the sidewalk again, the night felt sharper, crueler. She headed toward the park, where a row of metal benches sat under flickering streetlights. That was where she slept now. She pulled her thin coat tighter and sat down, knees drawn to her chest. The city lights shimmered in the puddles, and for a moment, she imagined the man from the station sitting beside her, warm and safe somewhere far away. "I hope he made it home," she murmured. The words vanished into the cold air. A soft drizzle began again, misting her hair. She tilted her head back and let it fall, eyes closed, half praying, half surrendering. She had no idea that somewhere else in the city, the man she had helped was staring at the same rain from a penthouse window, still holding the memory of her trembling hand and the crumpled $10 bill. But for Emily, tonight was just another test of endurance. She tucked her chin against her knees and whispered, "Tomorrow will be better." It was a fragile hope, but it was all she had left. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the overcast sky as Emily woke up stiff and cold on the park bench. Her coat was damp again, her shoes still wet from the night before. The world around her was already awake, joggers passing by, dog walkers chatting, the smell of coffee drifting from a nearby cart. For a moment, she sat still, watching life move on without her. Then she stood, brushing off the dew from her sleeves, and forced herself to start walking. She followed the sound of voices to a small corner church where a handwritten sign taped to the door read, "Free breakfast for those in need, all welcome." Inside, the air smelled of syrup and toast. Volunteers moved between tables, serving pancakes and smiles with equal warmth. Emily hesitated by the doorway until an older woman in a red apron waved her over. "You look frozen, dear," the woman said kindly. "Sit down, I will get you a plate." Emily murmured a thank you, her voice hoarse. The woman returned with a stack of pancakes and a cup of coffee so hot it made Emily's fingers tingle. "My name is Ruth," the woman said as she set down the plate. "Eat first, talk later." Emily smiled weakly and obeyed. The first bite nearly brought tears to her eyes. She had forgotten what it felt like to eat something warm. Ruth sat across from her after a while. "You have had a rough time, haven't you?" she said gently. Emily nodded. "Just bad luck, I guess." "Bad luck is just the world's way of asking us to keep going," Ruth replied. "There is a community kitchen on 5th Street. We could use an extra hand. Helping others helps yourself more than you think." Emily hesitated. "I do not have much experience." "You have a good heart," Ruth said with a wink. "That is all the experience you need." For the first time in days, Emily felt something spark inside her purpose, maybe, or the memory of it. That afternoon, she followed Ruth to the community kitchen, a small building painted light blue with the words "Open Hands" stenciled above the door. Inside, volunteers were busy chopping vegetables and packing paper bags of food. The air was filled with laughter and the comforting scent of soup. Ruth handed her an apron. "You can start by helping with the sandwiches." Emily tied the apron around her waist, a little clumsily, but soon her hands found rhythm spreading peanut butter, folding paper, stacking sandwiches. It felt strange to be part of something again, to hear her own laughter when someone made a joke about burnt toast. Hours passed quickly. When the work was done, she sat with Ruth by the back door, sipping coffee from paper cups. "You were right," Emily said quietly. "Helping does help." Ruth smiled. "Kindness always circles back, honey. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it finds its way home." Emily nodded, gazing at the street beyond the window. The sun had begun to set, painting the buildings gold. She still had no job, no apartment, no plan, but for the first time she did not feel invisible. She thought of the man at the station again, the one she had given her last $10 to. "I hope he is all right," she murmured. Ruth tilted her head. "What was that, dear?" "Nothing," Emily said with a small smile. "Just hoping someone else found their way home too." Ruth patted her hand. "They always do, one way or another." That night, as Emily walked back toward the park, she looked up at the glowing city skyline. It no longer seemed so unreachable. The wind carried the faint sound of laughter from the soup kitchen behind her. For the first time in a long while, she whispered to herself, maybe tomorrow really will be better. She did not know that tomorrow would bring a face she thought she would never see again. 2 weeks later, the morning rush filled the city again. The clatter of coffee cups and hurried footsteps echoed through downtown as Emily tied her apron behind the counter of the Open Hands community kitchen. She had started volunteering every day since Ruth introduced her, finding in that place a rhythm she did not know she had been missing. The once trembling girl at the park bench now greeted people with a soft smile and steady eyes. The kitchen had become her safe place, a spot where the smell of soup and the chatter of strangers made her forget the weight of the world. It was a Saturday morning when Ruth announced, "We will have visitors today, Emily. A group of donors from a foundation is coming by." Emily froze mid-stir. "Donors? Like rich people?" Ruth chuckled. "Yes, dear, the kind that wear suits and shake hands. Do not worry, just be yourself." By noon, the place buzzed with nervous energy. Volunteers scrubbed counters, lined up tables, and arranged sandwiches in neat rows. Emily smoothed her apron and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The door opened, and a group of well-dressed men and women entered. Their shoes clicked on the tile, their laughter polite and restrained. Among them was a man who walked a little slower than the rest, scanning the room with calm focus. His dark hair was neatly combed, his gray coat pressed, and yet his eyes carried something familiar, a quiet kindness she could not place. Then he looked at her. For a heartbeat, Emily forgot how to breathe. It was him, the stranger from the station, the man who had vanished into the train that rainy night. But now he looked nothing like the shivering traveler she remembered. He was composed, confident, and surrounded by people who clearly respected him. Her hand tightened around the ladle she was holding. Ruth leaned toward her and whispered, "You all right, dear?" Emily's lips parted, but no sound came out. The man approached the serving table, offering a warm smile. "This must be the heart of the place," he said, his voice steady and unmistakably the same. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears. She forced a small nod. "We just do what we can," she managed to say. He extended his hand. "David," he introduced himself. "David Carter." The name hung in the air. The volunteers around them straightened instantly. One of the coordinators hurried forward, shaking his hand enthusiastically. "Mr. Carter, thank you for visiting. The Carter Foundation has been a blessing to us." Emily blinked, her mind spinning. Carter Foundation. Of course. The logo was painted right there on the kitchen's donation board, an emblem she had walked past every single day. She stared at him, unable to hide her shock. He noticed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Have we met before?" he asked gently, though his eyes told her he already knew. I do not think so," she whispered. He nodded slowly, as if granting her the space to process. The group moved on to tour the kitchen, but Emily stood frozen, the noise fading into a low hum. Her heart raced with confusion. Why had he not said anything? Why pretend not to know her? Later that afternoon, after the visitors had gone, Ruth found Emily outside, sitting on the back steps. "You have been quiet," Ruth said, handing her a mug of coffee. "Something wrong?" Emily stared at the steam curling from the cup. "That man, the one from the foundation. I think I met him before." Ruth raised an eyebrow. "Before he was a donor?" Emily nodded slowly. "He was different then." Ruth smiled softly. "People often are, dear. Sometimes it takes time for the truth to show." Emily looked back at the kitchen door, her mind replaying his voice, his eyes, that rain-soaked night at the station. For the first time, she began to wonder if the kindness she gave away that day had found its way back to her after all. The next few days passed in a blur. Emily tried to focus on her duties at the kitchen, but her thoughts kept circling back to the man who had walked in so effortlessly and turned her world upside down. David Carter. The name sounded unreal on her tongue. Each time she caught sight of his face on the foundation's posters, her chest tightened with disbelief. Could that really have been him, the same stranger she had given her last $10 to? She wanted to believe it was just coincidence, but deep down, she knew. On Wednesday morning, Ruth called her into the small office near the pantry. "Emily," Ruth said, smiling with pride, "Mr. Carter personally requested to meet you. He said he was impressed by your dedication." Emily froze. "Me? Why?" "You tell me," Ruth replied with a wink. He asked if you could come to the foundation headquarters this afternoon. I think he has an opportunity for you." Emily's pulse quickened. "An opportunity? Do not ask me," Ruth said. "Go and find out." That afternoon, Emily stood in front of the glass building downtown, staring up at the golden letters that read Carter Foundation. It felt like stepping into another universe. Inside, the lobby gleamed with marble floors and soft lighting. The receptionist greeted her kindly and guided her to the elevator. Her reflection in the mirrored walls looked small and out of place, but she lifted her chin anyway. When the doors opened, David was waiting for her. He wore no suit jacket this time, just a crisp white shirt and that same calm, watchful expression she remembered from the station. "Emily," he said, offering a hand. "Thank you for coming." "I was not sure I should," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "You are full of surprises, Mr. Carter." He smiled faintly. "Please, call me David. And I owe you an explanation." He gestured for her to follow him into a sunlit office overlooking the city. On the desk sat a single frame of photograph of the community kitchen. "That night at the train station," he began, "I was not lying when I said I had lost my wallet. I really had. But I also did not tell you who I was. I had been working undercover for a few weeks, trying to understand what people go through when they have nothing. I wanted to see the world without privilege." Emily stared at him, unsure if she should laugh or cry. "So it was an experiment." "It was supposed to be," he said softly. "But then you happened. You gave me your last $10 without hesitation. That moment changed me. I realized kindness still exists, without agenda, without gain. I wanted to find you again to thank you properly." Emily's eyes burned. "You found me working at your own foundation. That is ironic," he chuckled. "Or fate, maybe. Either way, I would like to offer you something more permanent, a job. I think you would make an incredible coordinator for our outreach program. It would mean a steady salary, housing assistance, and the chance to keep doing what you are already doing, helping people." Emily blinked, words tangled in her throat. "Why me? There must be hundreds of people more qualified." "Because you understand what it feels like to stand in the rain and still choose to help," David said. "That kind of compassion cannot be taught." The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the city below. Emily took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "I do not know what to say." "Say yes," he replied gently. For the first time since that night at the train station, Emily felt hope rise in her chest like dawn breaking through the clouds. She nodded slowly. "Yes." David smiled, a rare warmth lighting his face. "Then let us start something new." As they shook hands, Emily could not help but think of Ruth's words, "Kindness always circles back." And now, she was living proof. The following weeks unfolded like a quiet dream. Emily began her new job at the Carter Foundation, learning more each day about the world she had once only seen from the outside. Her morning started with the hum of coffee machines and the rustle of papers in a bright office overlooking downtown. She coordinated community projects, visited shelters, and spoke with people whose stories mirrored her own. Each time she signed a document or answered a phone call, she remembered that this was not luck. It was the echo of one simple choice made at a rainy train station. David checked in often, not as a boss, but as a mentor. He would appear at her desk with 2 cups of coffee and ask, "How is the chaos treating you today?" She would laugh nervously, still unsure how to act around him. Yet his calm presence always steadied her. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words carried weight. "You know," he said one morning as they walked through the office hallway, "I used to think giving meant signing checks. But you taught me that giving starts with seeing." Emily smiled. "You make it sound like I changed the world." "Maybe not the world," he said, glancing at her with a half smile, "but you changed mine." His honesty left her speechless. Over the next month, the foundation launched a new outreach initiative called Project Second Step, an idea born from Emily's own suggestions. It offered transitional housing and job training to those trying to rebuild their lives. The board approved it unanimously, but David insisted she lead it. The first site opened near the community kitchen where it had all started. When she walked through its doors on opening day, Ruth was there, tears glimmering in her kind eyes. "Look at you," Ruth whispered, hugging her tightly. "From handing out sandwiches to running a program. I told you kindness comes full circle." Emily laughed softly. "You did say that." Cameras flashed as local reporters interviewed David about the new project. He spoke briefly, but his gaze kept drifting toward Emily as she helped a single mother fill out forms. When the event ended, he found her outside, leaning against the railing as the sunset bled gold over the skyline. "You did well today," he said quietly. She smiled, brushing hair from her face. "We did well." "No," he replied, "this was you." They stood there in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the light fade. "Can I ask you something?" Emily said finally. "When you first went undercover, what were you really looking for?" David's expression softened. "Truth, I suppose. I wanted to know if people would still be kind without knowing who I was. But what I found was better a reminder that people like you exist." Her heart fluttered at his words. "You make it sound like I am some kind of miracle." "Maybe you are," he said simply. The wind caught the last rays of sun, and for a heartbeat their eyes met and held. Something unspoken passed between them, fragile but real. Emily looked away first, her cheeks warm. "I should go finish the reports," she murmured. "Always responsible," David said with a chuckle. As she walked away, he watched her disappear through the glass doors, a faint smile on his lips. For years, he had built empires and measured success in numbers. But now, for the first time, he realized that his greatest investment might not be in business at all. It might be in a heart brave enough to give everything, even when she had nothing. But not everything stayed perfect for long. Success brought attention, and attention brought questions. As Project Second Step grew, so did the whispers inside the foundation. Some employees admired Emily's rise, but others doubted her. "She came from nowhere," one voice muttered in the hallway. "David seems a little too invested in her," another said. Emily tried to ignore them, burying herself in work. She spent long hours organizing reports, visiting shelters, and ensuring every donation reached the right place. But late at night, when the office was quiet, doubt began to creep in. Did she really deserve to be here? Was she just a charity case dressed up as a success story? One evening, as she was packing her things, David appeared at her door. "Still here?" he asked softly. She smiled wearily. "You know me. I cannot leave until everything is finished." He stepped closer, resting a hand on the back of a chair. "You do not have to prove yourself every day, Emily. You earned your place here." She hesitated. "Sometimes I am not sure anyone believes that." David studied her face for a long moment, then said quietly, "Let them talk. I know the truth, and so do you." His words should have comforted her, but instead they left her uneasy. The rumors about their connection were growing louder, and she feared they might cost him more than they cost her. The following week, during a board meeting, the tension finally surfaced. One of the senior directors leaned back in his chair and said bluntly, "Mr. Carter, we appreciate your passion for this project, but there are concerns about your objectivity. Miss Dawson's rapid promotion raises questions about favoritism." The room fell silent. Emily's hands went cold. David's expression hardened slightly, but his voice remained calm. "If you have questions about Emily's qualifications, you can read her reports and results. They speak louder than speculation." With respect, the director pressed, "Appearances matter. The foundation must maintain professionalism." David's jaw tightened. Professionalism is about impact, not perception. Emily wanted to speak, to defend him, but David's subtle shake of the head stopped her. After the meeting, she followed him to his office. "David, you cannot keep doing this," she said, her voice trembling. "You are risking your reputation for me." He turned, his eyes filled with quiet conviction. "Do you think I care about that?" "You should," she whispered. "You built this foundation. You built everything. And what good is all of it," he said, stepping closer, "if I cannot stand up for the one person who reminded me what it is for?" The words hung in the air, heavy and unguarded. Emily's breath caught. "David, Emily," he interrupted softly, "you have nothing to apologize for. You changed lives, not because of me, but because you refused to stop believing that people could be better." For a long moment, they just stood there, the city lights flickering through the glass walls around them. Then Emily broke the silence, her voice barely audible. "Maybe it is better if I step back from the foundation for a while. Let things calm down." David's expression darkened. "If you leave, the project will fall apart." "Then let it fall apart," she said, her eyes glistening. "It is not worth ruining your name." He reached out as if to stop her, but she had already turned away. When the door closed behind her, David stood motionless, his reflection staring back at him from the glass half-liter, half-man torn between duty and something far deeper. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, echoing the one truth they both tried to deny. Sometimes, Doing the right thing meant walking away, even when your heart wanted to stay. Emily kept her word. By the end of the week, her resignation letter sat on David's desk, neatly folded beside a mug of untouched coffee. She had not planned to leave so abruptly, but she knew if she stayed, the whispers would never stop, and neither of them would find peace. When she walked out of the foundation's glass doors for the last time, the city looked different, quieter, heavier, as if it understood the weight she carried. She went back to the community kitchen where everything had started. Ruth was there, her apron dusted with flour, her smile as gentle as ever. "So, you left," Ruth said simply, handing her a towel. "You always knew, didn't you?" Emily murmured, wiping her hands on the cloth. "That I would end up back here." "Sometimes," Ruth said, "we need to return to where our hearts first learned to care." Days turned into weeks, and Emily threw herself into helping again, this time without cameras, without headlines, just quiet purpose. She found peace in the rhythm of chopping vegetables, handing out meals, and listening to people's stories. But late at night, when the kitchen lights dimmed, she found herself thinking of David, his steady voice, the way he looked at her as if she was something precious. She wondered if he hated her for leaving or if he understood. Meanwhile, at the Carter Foundation, David tried to focus on work, but the office felt hollow without her laughter drifting through the halls. Project's second step faltered without its heart, and soon the board began to notice. Reports piled up, meetings ran long, but nothing seemed to fix the emptiness left behind. One rainy evening, David stood by his office window, staring out at the city. The same sound of rain tapping against glass pulled him back to that night at the train station. He saw her again in his memory drenched, trembling, and yet offering her last $10 without hesitation. That moment had changed him once. Maybe it could change him again. The next morning, he arrived at the community kitchen unannounced. The volunteers looked up in surprise as the tall man in a suit stepped through the door. Emily froze mid-step, the ladle in her hand dripping soup back into the pot. "David," she breathed, her voice trembling. He smiled faintly. "I heard there was an opening here. Thought I might volunteer." Ruth, watching from the counter, grinned knowingly. "We can always use an extra pair of hands," she said, handing him an apron. The rest of the day felt unreal. They worked side by side, saying little, the silence between them filled with unspoken words. When the last meal was served and the tables were cleared, David finally spoke. "I was wrong to let you walk away," he said softly. "The foundation was never about me. It was about people like you. You made it what it was." Emily looked at him, her eyes shining. "You do not need me there, David. You have everything." "No," he said, shaking his head. "I have everything except the reason I started all of it. That was you." Tears welled up, but she blinked them back. "You do not have to say that." "I am not saying it because I have to," he replied, stepping closer. "I am saying it because it is true. You once told me that kindness always circles back. I think I finally understand what that means." She smiled through the tears. "You found your way home. Only because you showed me where it was," he said. Outside, the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle, and for the first time in months, Emily felt the heaviness lift. Standing there in the quiet kitchen, surrounded by the smell of soup and the echo of laughter, she realized that some circles of kindness never end, they just find their way back, one heartbeat at a time. 1 year later, the morning light spilled through the tall windows of the renovated community center. The once small kitchen had transformed into a bustling hub now called Open Hands Headquarters, funded by the Carter Foundation but designed and led by Emily. Laughter filled the air as volunteers served breakfast to families and children. The scent of fresh bread mixed with coffee drifted through the hall. Emily moved between tables with her clipboard, greeting everyone by name. She had grown into her role with quiet confidence. Not the girl who once trembled at the edge of the world, but a woman who built her own. Near the entrance, Ruth stood proudly, a silver pin with the Open Hands logo gleaming on her apron. "Look at this place," she said, smiling. "I told you it would come full circle." Emily grinned. "You were right again." A soft cheer erupted across the room as David entered, holding a small box wrapped in white ribbon. His presence still drew attention, not because he was a millionaire, but because everyone there knew the story, how one act of kindness had changed both of their lives. He walked straight toward Emily, his gaze never wavering. "We have a surprise for you," he said, setting the box on the counter. Inside was a framed object, carefully preserved behind glass. Emily gasped. It was the crumpled $10 bill. "You kept it?" she whispered. David nodded. "I told you I would pay you back someday, but I realized there was no way to repay what you gave me. You gave me back my faith in people." He paused, his voice softening. "So, instead, I want to make this official. Every year, the foundation will host the $10 grant, funding small kindness projects inspired by your story." The crowd applauded, but Emily could only stare, her heart swelling. "David, this is just the beginning," he finished. The applause faded into laughter and chatter, but David stayed close beside her. As the day wound down and the last guests left, they stepped outside together. The city skyline shimmered in the sunset, and the sound of children's laughter carried from the park nearby. "You built something beautiful," David said quietly. "We built it," she corrected. He looked at her, smiling. "You know, I once thought wealth meant power, but now I know it means having the power to make someone's life better." Emily met his gaze, her voice steady. "And I once thought kindness was just a small thing you did when no one was watching. Turns out, it can change everything." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught as he opened it, a simple gold ring glinting in the fading light. "Emily Dawson," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you once gave me your last $10 without expecting anything in return. Now, I want to give you something priceless in return: my heart, my future, and the rest of my days. Will you marry me?" The world seemed to pause. Emily's eyes filled with tears, her smile trembling. "Yes," she said softly. 1,000 times yes." David slipped the ring onto her finger, and the crowd from inside, now gathered near the door, burst into cheers. Ruth wiped her eyes, laughing through her tears. The moment was simple, but perfect, the kind of ending that felt like a beginning. Later, as they stood hand in hand, Emily looked up at him and said, "Do you remember what I told you that night at the station?" David smiled. "You said you believed me, and I still do," she whispered. The sun dipped below the skyline, painting the world in gold. The wind carried the laughter of strangers, the sound of hope, and the echo of a promise that had come full circle. Kindness always finds its way home.